Welcome back, pod people. My guest today is Austin Smagalski, the writer-director of To Die Alone, a very limited cast, sort of psychological thriller set in the woods. And as always, this is a full spoilers podcast, so we will be getting into all of the details about the plot, or at least it might come up. So before we get into that, I do want to say that this is a movie where if you care a lot about spoilers, you should go into this blind. So I'll just recommend that, and we won't get into full spoiler territory immediately, but we will be bringing up things that if you care about spoilers, you would probably rather not hear. So I do recommend going and watching it first if you care about that sort of thing. So, Austin, To Die Alone has one of those setups that I see in a lot of low budget horror films where it's people walking around in the woods, which can be done really well or it can be done really poorly. And I'm happy to say that it's done quite well in To Die Alone. And I think a very large portion of that is how excellent the chemistry is between the two lead actors. And so could you talk a bit about how casting them went?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to get to talk about these films because you spend so much time working on them, and then sometimes it's folks get to watch it. It's 90 minutes, and then they're out, and you're just like, but that was like a year of my life. So kind of all you want to do is talk about it. So as far as the chemistry, we really put a lot of time into the casting process because this was a project that I came up with during COVID, where is you really couldn't get a big crew together. And so we were thinking about what could we do with, myself, couple actors, camera, what would be safe? And so I was like, okay, two people in the woods. I grew up backpacking. I was in the Scouts. I did 50 milers, 75 milers. And so I was like, okay, two people in the woods. The stakes, it's going to be a survival thriller. And then the biggest and most important thing was getting two people who could go through this emotional gamut together and just nail that chemistry. Because if you have two actors in a movie and those two actors don't have chemistry, you don't have a movie. So yeah, we went through a pretty extensive casting process. I actually had in the very first table read, James and another actress who I really appreciate her work. I had the two of them sit down, do a table read with a couple of the casting crew or a couple of the crew I'd already picked out. And just kind of from day one, James nailed Ford. He was able to do the comedy because the first 20 minutes of it or so are actually pretty funny. And then he was able to dig in when things got more serious and dire. And then as we did the open casting process, we did a lot of chemistry reads where we'd pair up different potential folks for Ford and Irving and see how they played off of each other. And so doing multiple steps where, they did self-tapes, but then we brought them in person, do individual auditions, and then pairing them up and doing those chemistry reads. It really took that full process to find the right people for this.
Awesome. So you cast the male lead before the female lead, is that right?
We had a sense that he was our guy, but we did audition other folks.
Okay.
So, because we knew that it was really all about not one or the casting one or the other, it was casting them as a pair. And so we did a mix and match during the auditions. We did mix and match scenes where they'd prepared like a short one-page scene, a couple of them, to see how their chemistry worked for comedy. So we did the Gorp scene, which for those who haven't seen, the two of them, Irving gets badly wounded. It's the two of them trying to get out of the woods together. And so there's sort of this moment of levity where they sit down and Ford explains what Gorp is, which for those who don't backpack, granola oats, raisins, peanuts, or for some folks, good old raisins and peanuts. But it's just a name for trail mix that a lot of backpackers use. And so it's this kind of back and forth. She's like, she thinks Gorp is just the funniest word. And so we did, those chemistry sessions where we had them going through that scene, light comedy to make sure that they kind of had that warm chemistry. But then taking on one of the bandaging scenes where she falls and she's bleeding and he's administering like an absolute first aid bandage. And, they had to be able to run that gamut. So we were really casting them as a duo, not individually.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so if I recall correctly, they're hiking the Pacific Coast Trail, is that right? In
Yeah, the
or
Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah,
Pacific Crest Trail, excuse me.
it's it's an incredible trail because it runs all the way from Mexico to Canada through the west coast of the U.S.
Is
And
that where
people
you
take
filmed it?
we filmed it along stretches of the PCT. We filmed it in Shasta Trinity National Forest
Oh, okay.
because we had a limited amount of shooting days. We only shot for 13 days,
Okay.
and 11 of those were in the woods. And so we needed to be able to get like a variety of spots. I wanted to shoot on the actual PCT for a good chunk of it. And then we also needed to find waterfalls. So we needed to find snow. We needed to find, these valleys and stuff. And Shasta was really a spot where we could get those variety of locations that just felt like the middle of nowhere. But in reality, most of the time behind the camera is an actual bathroom and like a whole bunch of people and gear and cars and all of that. Because as much as we wanted this to feel like it was in the middle of nowhere, we didn't want the crew and the cast to have to go through being in the absolute middle of nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. I know that most of the time when people film in the woods, they're actually filming quite close to like the entrance to the trail and things like that. Is that what you guys did?
For the most part, yeah. I think the most we ever hiked in was about half a mile. There's a scene pretty early on where they're working their way up this big hill together just after they started hiking together. And that was, I think, probably about a half mile in. But that's as far as we ever got. And it's also for safety reasons. We had an on-set medic because obviously, we're out
Yeah.
there, we're in the elements, things happen.
You don't want the
Um,
stuff that happens in the movie to actually happen to the actors.
yes. Yeah, no, we were very cautious about that because it's just it's very easy to underestimate how dangerous it can be out there. There was one moment where we were shooting, and it was just the two of them hiking and talking, and the camera crew was pretty far set back. It's a wide shot, and I was over talking to the actors, and I looked down and I was like, "Hey guys, can you get behind me, please?" Because there was a snake. Now, I don't think it was a venomous snake, but you're out in the woods. There's wildlife out there. You're sharing that space.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a wild time out there.
Yeah. Um, okay, so the actors were cast in large part to make sure that they had good chemistry with each other. So tell me a bit about the script. Was there any improvisation that the actors did, or was it all to the word as written?
We hewed pretty close to the script. There are definitely moments where, if we were doing a pickup or if we were taking a scene from the middle, there would be a little bit of improvisation just to kind of get you into the headspace of those lines and then continue forward. And so there's a line from Irving, which we'll get a little bit into spoiler territory here. She's talking about why she's out on the trail, talking about her relationship with her husband, which is very fraught. She's in an abusive situation. And she improved a line, Lisa J. Starrett improved a line that was really, really great that we loved. And the line was, I knew I wanted out, but I didn't know how to leave.
Ah,
And
yeah. Okay.
and and that was like it was very much in the tone and the intention of what the lines were saying. But there was something about that was very hers. And as she was kind of finding those words, it felt like Irving was really finding those words. And so that was definitely a moment where we were like, absolutely keep that in.
Cool. Yeah, so to move more fully into spoiler territory, this is very much a twist movie in that I don't wanna say it's all a dream, but it's pretty close to it all being a dream, in that the vast majority of what we see with the characters hiking and stuff, is like a hallucination that the main character is having as she's in the ambulance after having been, uh, in a car accident. So, personally, that kind of twist doesn't upset me or anything, but I know that it upsets a lot of other people. And so I'm curious, did you have that in mind when you were writing it, knowing that that's the sort of like that's a controversial artistic decision to make? And did you ever consider doing just like a more of a straight thriller sort of thing? Uh, Tell me about that writing process.
Yeah, I my first pitch of this movie was a text to my good friend Noah Rose Diamond, who was served as co-editor on this film. And as much as the original idea of let's get myself, two actors, camera out in the woods, was sort of a basic survival thriller. From that very, very first pitch, I knew what I wanted this thing to do, and I knew what I wanted the twist to be. And I do think that those sort of "it was all a dream" reveals, those are a bit controversial because a lot of times they don't contribute to the story and to the character and to the arcs and those things. So a lot of times, it's just kind of not a cop out, but it doesn't feel like it's makes the story better. Like a lot of times, you could just take the story for what it was, and that's just fine. But with this film, what I really wanted to do, and what I think the sort of sleight of hand that it does so effectively, is it takes the feelings, the anxiety, the stress, the fear of this survival story, and we come to realize that it's not just a physical survival they're trying to achieve. Like they're not just trying to physically survive. She's trying to emotionally survive the endeavor she's been through, or these, this relationship with her husband and this traumatic moment that we reveal near the end. Um, and I think what it does is it takes all of the emotions you've built up trying to watch them survive and rooting for them, and you realize what you're actually rooting for is for her to get her daughter to safety.
Okay. Um, yeah, tell me a bit about how you structured the reveal of that, because I know when I was watching it, when it first cut to a flashback of her and her daughter, I was like, my initial reaction was, "What? I get it. Yeah, she's kind of running away from home. I get it. I don't need to see this part. Get back to the dramatic being in the woods stuff." But then, like the second and third time that we went back, I was like, "Oh, okay. There's more to this. It's not just reiterating stuff that I already knew. It is revealing new information here." I didn't like write down the timestamps for when the reveals happened, but it was a while into the movie. It wasn't like in the first 10 minutes or anything like that. So how did you choose when to reveal the information and when to keep things secret or even misleading?
Yeah, so it very much came down to Irving's relationship with Ford. So Ford throughout this movie sort of acts as a guide, taking her through this near death experience as she's basically either going to survive or is not. And that, on the surface is this survival story of being wounded in the woods and trying to make it out. But in the real world, it's she's been in this car crash after running away from an abusive situation. And so Ford is sort of serving as this guide throughout the process. And so he initially approaches her. She's very wary of him. He sort of gets her a little bit more comfortable with him. And then she's willing to open up about what's happened. And so it was sort of that relationship that gave us permission to dig deeper into her story and what had happened to her. And also the fact that she had had this bite, this traumatic experience that then sort of it lays out the stakes as, this is life or death. And suddenly talking about this stuff, you don't have to guard it quite as closely. You might not even survive here. The stakes are just so much bigger than to make yourself vulnerable. And so just as that relationship evolved, opening up the story more and more, and then her coming to realize what she actually needs to do, which is not to run away, but to go and get her daughter out of that situation.
Oh,
That's kind of the natural structure of it.
okay. Um, Yeah, so this movie doesn't really fit into this genre, but it reminds me a lot of the genre that I think me and probably other folks as well have been calling the real monster is trauma, where like the most famous example of this is the Babadook, where
Mhm.
there's a supernatural monster, but it's a metaphor for the character's trauma, and it may or may not literally exist. Um, and in this, there isn't a monster. Instead, it's the dangers of the wilderness. And so I'm curious why the wilderness? Why not some other representation of that struggle?
So I, as I mentioned before, I grew up backpacking, and I'd always wanted to make a movie in the woods. I know that there's sort of the trope of like cabin in the woods or people isolated in the woods because that tends to be very cheap to shoot. Think like Blair Witch Project and stuff,
Heck
right?
yeah.
Um, and I'm not going to say that that didn't factor in thinking about myself, a camera, two actors, but also it was we wanted to make sure we'd be in an open air environment because this was like 2020 when I was originally starting to put it together. And so uh, there's something about the vastness of these places. Again, growing up, going on 50 milers and 75 milers and stuff, when you reach the peak of a hike and you look out and you see just the sheer vastness of the wilderness, it is both beautiful and magnificent, but also terrifying. And so to me, that had always been something that really, really stuck with me. And those stakes, the idea of her having run away and not knowing if she's going to live or die, I couldn't think of a better way to embody that.
All right, cool. Yeah, okay. So, since you're somebody who's actually in real life well acquainted with hiking in the woods and things like that, is there anything that you see in movies where the characters are lost in the woods or are hiking in the woods as the pretense for the horror film that takes you out of the moment that comes across as unrealistic to you that you wish directors would do differently?
Hmm, it's a very good question. Funny enough, I haven't seen a ton of hiking and camping movies. I mean, I think like a movie like Wild does just fine with it. I think um, there's this funny movie, Sea of Trees, if you've
Hmm.
ever heard of that one. It's a little hit or miss. It's Matthew McConaughey in Japan in the forest that's very famous for people committing suicide.
Oh yeah, Aokigahara. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of hit or miss, and obviously, it's a little tough when folks go to Japan and shoot in that forest as far as sensitivity and stuff. That's a little rough.
Oh, they shot it on location?
I believe so.
Oh wow.
But either way, they're telling the story of that place. But I do think that that movie actually does a really interesting job of not being realistic for like hiking and camping purposes, but doing it because the space is a little liminal.
Yeah, if you want a really amusing horror film about camping in the woods, I think one of my favorites, or hiking in the woods, I should say. I think one of my favorites is Day of the Animals,
Okay.
um, which is an old, I want to say, Steve Martin horror film from back before he was a comedic actor.
Hmm.
And the premise is that thanks to the hole in the ozone layer, there's enough radiation getting in that above a certain elevation, the radiation drives all animals insane and they get attacked by animals. Um,
Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, okay, okay.
yeah, yeah, it's in the grand history of ripoffs of the birds. That's one of my
Mhm.
favorites.
Oh, that's good. That's yeah. It's such a specific time period too. Like it's so dated at this point. Like, fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, I love, seeing, movies like that and really getting a sense of the time in which they were made. Okay, so do you have any tips for anyone else who's going to be making a movie set in the woods like that? So obviously, from a practicalities standpoint, we've already talked about like you don't actually need to go deep into the woods. You can just point your camera away from the utilities, and then nobody will know that they're there. But for like giving that feeling of isolation and things like that, do you have any advice for other filmmakers?
I think a lot of it comes down to blocking. I think you can do a lot of interesting things where you move through the space and let the takes be a little bit longer because
Okay.
if you are moving around and you can feel the space around you a little bit more rather than just locking things down, it just feels more like you're actually out there, where things are like a little bit more imprecise. We tended to go handheld for the purpose of just kind of feeling in the moment with the characters and also doing a lot of longer takes where we're wrapping around them and we see there's woods on that side, there's woods on that side. Like we were able to get just far enough from the roads and stuff that we were able to build that sense of isolation, and you can do that without getting that far away.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's interesting because my thought would have been like if you really want to get that sense of space, then like a locked off tripod shot can that's far away and shows the character navigating the environment could be good for that. Whereas I usually think of handheld stuff as being more personal and potentially claustrophobic because
Mm,
like even a really wide angle lens, you don't get the peripheral vision that you get as like an actual person in a space.
yeah.
Um, so that's interesting.
we
Uh,
we we do use some wides, and obviously there's a fair number of drone shots and stuff like that that we use to build the space, to show like the vastness of those woods. But I think that, I mean, this is such a personal film, and it's so much about Irving and her state of mind and where she's at. That if you stick to that character and you move through a space, you're sort of picking up the space by osmosis while you're also watching her. And then
okay.
again, her reaction to everything too. Like it's just a way of getting both the grandness of the place and the emotion of the moment kind of in one.
Cool. Yeah, there's a movie that came out recently that I didn't get to see in theaters, but I'm waiting for it to hit Shudder. In a Violent Nature. Have you seen that?
Mm, yes, I've heard a lot about that one. I've seen the trailers and clips, and
Okay.
I'm very excited to see it once it's out.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't really go to the normal movie theater anymore. We have a drive-in movie theater in the town that I live in, and
Okay.
so I love going to that, but they do have a more limited selection than a big multiplex does.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of movies where the thing that's going on in a literal sense is a metaphor for the thing that's going on in an emotional sense. And also for, low budget movies shot in the woods. um, so when you're making a movie that's so strongly focused on the emotional journey of the main character, you really need the audience to care about them. And if you're not going to do the sort of cliche save the cat thing where you show the character do something that's like makes the audience go, "Aw,"
Mhm.
um, and in particular, like you have this really troubled character who is feeling guilty about not doing the things that she should have earlier. Um, how do you make the audience care about the character?
So I think in large part that comes out again in the relationship. So that's one of the reasons the chemistry is so important, is because when she is so guarded in the beginning,
And
and we get these,
you're talking about her relationship with the male lead,
yeah,
not
with
her
with
relationship with her
Ford.
daughter.
Correct.
Okay.
So the film starts, she's on her own, and we get some little snippets of why she's there. We do see, she drops the fox toy that's her daughter's, and she chases after that, and it's kind of our first like little urgent moment. And we kind of get the sense that something's there, right? There's something that she wants that she does not have, or something that, you know, something she's
Yeah.
pursuing. And then once the relationship starts to build, watching her come out of her shell, I think, is the real way people first really start to connect with her, because they realize
Okay.
she's been guarded for a reason, and there's difficult
Hmm.
stuff that she's opening up about. And as that vulnerability starts to come out, I think that's really where we start getting like a personal, deep connection to her and a rooting for her. And so, you know, the injury and everything happens, and yes, it's man versus wild, and we kind of naturally root for man to win in that one. But it's also these moments where she's opening up, and we're realizing that there's a guilt, and that she's struggling with something, and that we just really want her to come through whatever that is as we get those little pieces. And so that's one
Okay.
of the
Yeah.
that's one of the functions of the relationship between the two of them, is as she, you know, it's he's sort of a conduit for her to open up, because in the end what she needs to do is to confront these things and realize that she actually needs to go back for her daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's interesting. So I watched the movie once all the way through. I didn't uh rewatch it after that because I'm very, very busy at the moment. But so the sort of emotional journey of it stuck with me more than the literal sequence of events. Um, Particularly at the end, my mental image of how exactly it ends is a little blurry. Um, but the ending was, as I recall, was very quick. The literal description of events with like the ambulance and everything happens very rapidly. Um, how much of that was just you didn't want to drag things out versus you did want to make it like really rapid? Uh, Tell me about the decision making there to make, because it's probably more than 95% of the movie is in the woods, and therefore her hallucination, and the actually literally occurring events are making up only a tiny sliver of the film. So was it always like that from the beginning, or did you change that at all? Talk a bit about that timing.
We originally shot more of the conflict with Ben. That was originally one big scene, and it got broken up into a couple of pieces during the moment where Ford and Irving are sitting on the log after they've had their confrontation. Um, but the ending actually used to be significantly longer. So I just finished putting together the deleted scenes for this film, and one of the big deleted scenes is there is actually a scene in the hospital afterwards. So once she wakes up,
Ah,
we were in the hospital, and there was a bit more time to decompress there, where Ford actually meets Irving for the first time, like in the real world here. And they sort of digested what had happened. And he hands her the fox that was in the car with her and says, "And we found this." And then it turned to she needs to go get Nori. And then there was a little bit longer of a scene. We did a lot of improv actually on. There's only a few shots of it, and there's no dialogue in the actual film. But the scene where she goes into basically arbitration, where she's getting divorced. Um, and there's like one or two shots of that in the actual film, but we did a whole bunch of improv, and there's this extended scene of like the judge sitting down and talking through, okay, here's the process, here's what we're going to do. And then the two of them starting to kind of argue their case a little bit. Um,
okay.
and it was too much. There's a poetic nature to the way the film ends as it's currently cut, and I think that it just serves the character better, because in the end she's reaching the end of her arc, making that decision and going from inactive and fearful to being active, to making this choice, to making this decision. that truly is her character arc. And I felt like to go through all of that and kind of over explain, and
All
it was too
right.
much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so speaking of Irving, uh, I find that when creating characters, one of the most difficult things for me is deciding on their names. And Irving is an unusual name in general, but especially for a woman. And so how did that name come about?
Each of their names have a relationship with water.
Ah, okay,
So
so like the River Irvine.
Irving is I believe it's a Scottish word for a creek. And then ford obviously is clearly to ford a river, to cross a river.
Right.
And so
Okay.
as a guide character, that's very much where his name
Ah,
came from.
okay, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And as much as we talked about being a dream or a hallucination or whatever this forest space may be, I very much thought of it as the space between life and death. With some of the
Okay.
wide shots, we're really trying to evoke the feeling of like the shadow of the valley of death and things like that.
All
And
right.
in the score, we use what's called the DSE ray, which is it's a progression of notes that was very commonly used at funeral processions, like Gregorian funeral chants and stuff like that. And
Okay.
it's been used in a lot of different things. Like it's used in big movies like Star Wars. It's that progression is quite literally the main theme in The Shining. It's been used throughout films for decades and decades at this point. But that was like we based a lot of the score off of that because this is the space between life and death. And she's truly trying to find whether she's going to live or not. And that's like her first confrontation with where she decides to split on the path. She goes down to the waterfall and faces the waterfall. She's quite literally facing death.
Okay. Yeah. Was there ever the possibility of including anything more sort of explicitly supernatural in that? Because the reason it occurred to me to ask is because there's a scene in the movie where uh, in the forest she hears the ambulance siren. Um, I didn't actually hear the siren in that moment. Um, and so when she says that she heard a siren or she heard something and then Ford says like you can hear it too, the sirens, uh my immediate interpretation of that line was the sort of Greek mythological sirens that call people to their death
Mm-hmm.
rather than like an ambulance siren, which is named after the Greek mythological sirens, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously is a different thing in the modern day. And so for a moment I was going like, oh, is this going to turn into like, the last act twist is that this is a supernatural thriller?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, kind of in that there's this, the thing we're watching is not literal reality, but not really. I mean, like it's really everything that happens in the movie could happen in real life. People have near death experiences and big dramatic emotionally important dreams. Like that's a real thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, was there ever the possibility of making something more explicitly supernatural as part of the story?
So we do nod to that. There, when she gets bit in the water, yeah, there's a shot underwater. It's a wide shot of her swimming, and something swims in front of the camera. And if you watch that, it's definitely got a movement to it that feels a little bit like a siren. And then it's later on when she comes back to the lake on purpose. You do see something moving in the water in a couple of those shots, and so there's a little bit of a nod towards that. We
Okay.
kept it a little ambiguous. We didn't want to go full on, siren pops out of the water kind of thing. But yeah, if you look closely, you can definitely see things moving in the water that shouldn't be there.
All right. Uh, how did you do those shots out of curiosity? Like, is that CGI? Is that a puppet? Is it a person swimming in front of the camera?
We did VFX for that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
just some light touch stuff.
Yeah, so VFX are famously expensive and can eat up basically an arbitrarily huge amount of any movie's budget. And so this is definitely a low budget film, as it is the case for everybody that I interview. So I'm gonna guess you got a fairly good deal on that because it's only like what, 3 VFX shots in the entire film. Um, w- what was the reasoning behind wanting to do that versus um, something practical in camera, or just like leaving that out entirely?
So there's actually about 10 or 12 VFX shots in the film. And most of those are in some of our wider shots. We weren't able to tell that there was actually either like the corner of another camper's tent in the background,
Oh,
or there's one drone shot that actually the title shot that comes down on that tilts down on the lake, where we have the big Tadai alone. Um, and in that shot, we didn't realize at the time that you could definitely see a couple of RVs and stuff like that. So we had to do a little bit of painting.
okay,
Um,
yeah, that is definitely the most common kind of VFX shot, I
yeah.
think.
But that said, there were a couple of shots where we were, where we added the creature that is in the water.
Right,
And those, the cost of those was pretty modest. The nice thing is we sort of did the Jaws effect on that, and the less you show of it, the scarier it can be sometimes. And so
right,
we just wanted to add, enough movement in the water that, something's clearly approaching her, but we didn't want to get too, didn't want to
yeah,
get too explicit with it. And same with the moving in the water after or as she's walking into it.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I definitely, when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, are we gonna get a monster?" Oh, no, okay. I mean, like, did I see a thing? I don't know. It could go either way.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, this
yeah,
this film flirts a little bit with horror, but it's not a horror film. It really isn't. It could go
interesting.
that direction, but
Ah,
yeah,
all
I
right.
very
I
much see it in that psychological thriller vein.
Okay, yeah, to me, thriller is a subset of horror. I have a more expansive
Mhm.
definition than I think some people do, but, what to you is the difference there?
Um, to me, horror in general is something that's trying to evoke specifically fear out of its audience. Like it's kind of what it's trying to get and evoke from the
Okay,
audience. And so this is a film that, like, while there are, scary moments, it's not specifically to scare the audience or to instill fear in them. It's very much to instill the stakes. And so
okay,
like the jump moments that we have, the scary moments that we have, are like, when she first sees the fawn, and that's a bit of a shock. It's all to sort of serve that same emotional journey.
okay.
Not that horror can't have an emotional journey. There's a lot of really great emotional horror movies, but
Of
it
course, yeah.
they're also very much trying to like engage you as an audience member in a trying to scare you, trying to spook you, trying to however.
Okay. Yeah, to me, a lot of the most emotionally affecting horror stuff does less of a like an explicit scare and more like a sense of dread. And I
Mm,
definitely got that from a lot of moments, especially the scene where she's in the car and her abusive husband gets home like earlier than she expected. Like that scene had me on the edge of my seat. And that was the like any movie that has a scene like that in it is probably going to be, in my mind, categorized as a horror film, um,
interesting.
because that was sort of the, like, emotional core of the movie to me is the, like, there's this sort of background sense of dread, but I can't and it's kind of coming from being in this, in the middle of nowhere, especially once, she's injured and they can't get out, and then there's, like, the loop thing going on where they go as far as they can and they end up where they started, uh, so, yeah, to me, it I would call it a horror film. So this is your second feature film, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. The first one was Donovan Reed back in 2019.
okay. So what's your, plan going from here? Do you have another movie in mind that you intend to make?
So I have, oh, pardon. I have the next concept all sketched out, and I'm working on the script for it. But the next thing I actually have in the pipeline is I have a very, very different thing documentary about dog rescues, which I
Oh,
already
all
have
right.
entirely in the can. I shot with three different rescues. I followed different stories from the moment they're picked up all the way to getting adopted. And that's at this point, that's in the can. I have like a 2 hour assembly edit of it, and we're starting to hack it down and work on it.
Nice.
But yeah, that's the next thing for me, which is obviously a little bit of a tonal shift. Um, but that said, there's some really, really interesting work that goes into dog rescue that a lot of people don't really know. And
Okay.
so, kind of getting into the background of like these um, people who form their own nonprofits, who basically the entire thing is just them. They run their entire operation out of Instagram, and they're
Out of
helping close the.
Instagram?
Yeah, it's wild.
Huh.
But they, through the volunteers that they muster and specifically targeting high kill shelters, they're able to get a lot of these dogs out of dangerous situations and into fosters and then get them adopted. And so
Okay.
they're trying to close that gap of, the dogs who go into the shelter system and don't make it out.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
All right. So, going from a tightly scripted fictional film to a, I'm gonna guess, pretty much entirely unscripted documentary film, what do you see as the differences and similarities in terms of how you get the audience to care about the subjects? I imagine with a documentary specifically about dog rescues, it's probably fairly easy because you have this sort of save the cat moment built into all of it. Uh,
We are quite literally saving the dogs. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, I think the fundamentals actually don't change that much. So, well, what I do for a living is I'm a TV editor, and I actually work in true crime. And so
Hmm.
I think as I've spent a couple of years in that, I've really built up the story chops of understanding how to get people to engage with the character. And again, this is an unscripted, but I think that feeds into scripted, and I think vice versa. They really support each other. And so to me, it's really about showing personal moments. It's about capturing difficult moments. We have some very difficult and dramatic moments that happen in the film that I happen to be there to capture. And I think when you get a whole portrait of somebody, including the struggles that they have and what they go through, I think you can really empathize with them. I mean, that's sort of the theory of To Die Alone, is that, you know, as she opens up, that's where we really connect with her and understand her and empathize. And I think there's no medium that creates empathy better than film. And I think that's true for scripted. I think it's true for unscripted. I think there's just no other way to put yourself in somebody's shoes quite like that.
Yeah, the only medium that seems like it might compete at all is ironically a medium that I don't particularly care for myself, which is video games. Um,
Mm.
which
I am
sh-
also
sh-
a gamer, and I love a great narrative driven game. Like things like Bioshock and stuff like that. Like I absolutely love them.
oh yeah, I mean
That's
I am also very much a gamer and love a good narrative driven game, but I like tabletop games, not video games.
ah.
But
I've done my fair share of that too. Me and a group of people did a D&D podcast for a season and stuff like that. And
fun.
yeah, no, I just love storytelling. I think there's so many different ways to engage with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think film is really interesting in that regard because you can so easily jump around from different perspectives in ways that you don't really see as much in other media. And you can have, yeah, you can sort of force the audience into different characters' points of views and yeah, it's cool. It's a one of my it's the thing that I talk about all the time for a reason.
Yes. No, that's movies are wonderful. And again, scripted, unscripted, I think the goals remain the same. I think it's about sharing who people are and their struggles and learning a little bit about ourselves in the process of seeing and experiencing people like that.
Nice. Great. So, um, if
I've got an anecdote if you want to
oh
sprinkle,
yeah, absolutely, please.
sprinkle it in somewhere. Um, One of the inspirations for this film was that I went on a 50-mile backpacking trip with the Scouts back when I was like 18.
Wow.
Uh, and I'd been on a bunch of those 50-mile backpacking trips, but on that one in particular, I wore the wrong socks, got some blisters on my feet, went in a lake, and the next morning I woke up and my foot was swollen and a little green.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, not so great. We were, I want to say, probably 5, 6 miles in. But I was with a good group of people. Uh, Somebody fashioned me a sort of crutch, which originally was actually in To Die Alone, but we decided against because just as a prop, it was just too cumbersome. It was weird. It didn't. But yeah, I had to, hike my way out of the woods on this crutch as my foot was totally swollen up and go immediately to a hospital. And so
Wow.
that was
So did
so
you just like twist your ankle and not realize it in the moment, or?
no. So I'd gotten blisters. I just had some sort of open sore or something on my foot, and I went in the lake in a particularly messy bit of that lake, I guess. But whatever happened, my foot got infected.
Oh, okay.
It's a
Wow.
gross story. But also it was a little harrowing, and I was like, man, if I didn't have like this big group of people out here, and I wasn't, like didn't have folks to hike back with and stuff, that would have been a really scary situation.
Yeah, that it certainly does. So a 50-mile hike, how long is that intended to take, assuming that nobody gets a twisted ankle or infected foot or anything?
Yeah, those last roughly a week.
A week.
Um,
Okay. So you're doing
yeah,
about 7 miles a day?
yeah, thereabouts. It's usually the first day or so is pretty mild because it's you're driving up, and that's when you carry the heaviest food. And you cook
Yeah.
that the first day, so your load's a little lighter as you go on. Um, but yeah, it's 6, 7 days, something like that.
All right. Yeah, that's I've done backcountry things on like an archaeological survey and stuff, but that was very much like we hike several miles into where we're going to be, and then we camp there and we stay there for several days, and then we hike out. We're not
Hmm.
going distance every day.
Yeah,
And you carry all your stuff in once, set up, break it down when you're done, not break it down every morning. So
yeah,
that sounds like quite a bit of effort to do that every
yeah.
day.
I mean, you get to see such incredible places, though. Like that's the hiking up. I spent my childhood hiking up in the Sierras, and it's just in California. And it's just so beautiful.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay, so where would you like to direct anybody who's listening to this to find your work and follow along with your stuff? Do you have social media you'd like to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. So the film itself right now is still playing at festivals. So if folks who are interested in the film, they can learn more about it at glasscreekfilms.com. We're on socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that deal, at To Die Alone Film. And we are sort of wrapping up our summer festival run. The intention is to be out this fall, and so you can learn more at those platforms.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.